They're switching this New Year's report that's coming out. They're actually mentioning cooling in the report. They're talking about cooling, but they're saying that the cooling is because of warming, which makes no sense. If it's cooling, it's cooling.
Adapt 2030 Mini Ice Age Conversations covers changes in our climate due to a new and intensifying grand solar minimum. In the media, overlooking, downplaying, or burying cold weather changes occurring on our planet. This is in order to keep the global warming agenda steaming full speed ahead. I do this podcast and radio program because we need to begin conversations on how to adapt our food growing strategies long before 2030 as agricultural zones shift, affecting global crop output, but very few mainstream media outlets are talking about the most important issue of our time, cold weather crop losses. Our sun is going through a 400-year cycle, which has effects on our weather patterns as our magnetosphere weakens and the jet streams go out of flow. It's not CO2, it's not you, it's the sun. Are you ready to thrive in the grand solar minimum? Then join me for Mini Ice Age Conversations. I'm your host, David Dubine.
The IPCC, our favorite bunch of persons with wrong models who always ask for money, they're switching this New Year's report that's coming out. They're actually mentioning cooling in the report. Now, they're talking about cooling, but they're saying that the cooling is because of warming, which makes no sense. If it's cooling, it's cooling. But the IPCC report mentions cooling, which is a gigantic step forward anyway for them to admit and even use that lexicon of cooling. Great. But the way they explain it is the heating is causing the cooling. So again, they won't ever come off the CO2 narrative. They're going to keep pushing that thing again and again and again. Now, as I was mentioning before, the Asian buyers, the Asian food prices, Philippines, etc., Myanmar. Now we have China's inflation, 6-month high, driven by a surge in food prices due to extreme weather. 9% rise in vegetable prices, 13% rise in meat. Okay, the list can go on there. What are the citizens in that country going to stop spending on first as they divert that money into the food sector? So we're starting to see it country by country, and now it's not just little tiny economies, Fiji. Now we're over into China, second largest economy on the planet, getting driven, slammed by food inflation, and it's not going to stop. You know, they're just still taking into consideration the hundreds of millions of chickens they just had to slaughter due to flu. The bird flu is back. Have to dig into the newspaper to see which exact strain it is because they're changing and flipping so quickly with these bird flu strains over there. It's hard to keep up anymore. That would include geese, not just chickens, but geese, quail, fowl, ducks, anything like this, the birds. So you can expect the meat prices in birds, fish, meat, poultry, it's all going up. Even the fish food, now they're telling people, because of the shortages in the millers, if you will, and the soya bean processors that do the fish meal, the largest soya bean processor in China went out of business. They went bankrupt. China government bailed them out, though. But during that interim of being sort of out of business and not being able to function, the creditors were there, and people wanted to confiscate machinery, et cetera, inside the factories and processing facilities. They supplied a lot of food and fish pellets, fish feed manufacturers. They're kind of all in the same ballpark there, if you will. So what they had told the citizens, well, since the soybean manufacturers and the soybean processors are not able to do this and the food manufacturers can't give you the fish feed, and it was all an excuse as to why the price of fish was rising now. Pig prices are going up because the soybean millers can't get the soybean in there because of the trade war with the United States. Okay, that's understandable. Good excuse. I'll buy it. It's like an 8 out of 10 of an excuse. But then the fish prices were rising. So see, this is the thing where something so obscure that they had to now make an excuse why fish prices are rising across China. Have you taken a look at your own prices in the United States? North Carolina is a large chicken producer, especially Georgia too, but it wasn't too affected by the hurricane. But if you come down in the southeast U.S., a lot of chicken farms. But see, it's so explainable. You can explain it away, and it seems semi-legitimate as well, all these excuses for all the food price rises. Now, what if it's really something else going on? Now, you cannot tell me that this many countries across the planet are experiencing crop losses, food price inflation, all at the same time due to random circumstances. This random thing is happening over there, and this random thing's happening, and this random thing here, and there, yeah, right. I just don't buy it. Now, how do you think they're going to explain that to the citizens? You got this soybean spat with America. So which is it really? Is it they knew the cold weather was coming, so they were using the soybean tariff war to explain it away as normal? Which one's more frightening for a populace? Cold is destroying our crops and we have no control over it, and next winter's going to be colder, and next autumn's going to be cooler, and next spring. And from this point forward, year after year, all these crops are going to be lost more and more, larger and larger amounts. The food prices are going to keep rising indefinitely, and this year is just like a drop in the bucket for 10% inflation. When you're talking literally about doubling and tripling of food prices by 2021, 2022? Or is it easier just to say that there's a trade war with America and the reason your soybeans are costing more money is because there's a trade war, those bad Americans?
And speaking of cycles, my new book with my co-author Bill Porter, Climate Revolution, a must-read for understanding our sun-driven climate. As we progress deeper into this new Eddy grand solar minimum, weather extremes leading to global food scarcity and higher food prices are here now. This book describes the expected changes, how to survive and thrive during future challenging times, and also practical preparations. The entire book is interactive with over 250 links. You can click and go out to the scientific aspect of what we're talking about with the repeating cycles in this grand solar minimum. The science is explained so you understand the mechanisms. The solutions are there because we know we're going to face these exact same problems again that were faced in the Maunder minimum, the Sporer minimum, the Wolf minimum. Find designs for building greenhouses, grow guides, beam soil techniques, as well as bioreactors to create your own growth hormones for the soil. Available now, the new Adapt 2030 Climate Revolution. The link's in the description box below.
You could stir up national sovereignty as well, couldn't you? So which one? You know, it'd be much more beneficial for a government just to stir it up and say, hey, the Americans are causing your food prices to rise with all their bad tariffs. Culpability is gone from nature. Suddenly there's an enemy at the gates, if you will, somewhere to throw that anger at. Certainly they don't want that anger thrown at them for not preparing and not telling the citizens that to get ready for this grand solar minimum event. Of course not. That would never happen, would it? You know, they're going to have to start to control the narrative in the media here shortly, and we can already see this beginning to happen here. Central America, 2 million risk of starvation after climate shift. Now, this goes in with the shifting rainfall patterns. We're seeing this globally. You know this is happening. Everywhere you look, it's a once in a 200-year flood. This is easily explainable. Easily explainable. It is a shift in the intertropical convergence zone. This happens every grand solar minimum. Magnetosphere weakens and our jet streams move into different flows. So does our moisture. And since they're going and being pushed and shoved into new places that haven't really adjusted yet with the cloud patterns and the cloud cells globally, you know, you're going to get some crash ups like a traffic jam. You're going to get those bunching up of the clouds, and it'll take a few years. It'll start to smooth out eventually. But the shifting rainfall patterns, creating drought in some areas and massive floods in others. Once in a 200-year storm, that's a normal thing now. Once in a century storm, that's like weekly, minutely, daily. That's the new norm. If you know what's happening, awesome. You can start to prepare for it. You can see the opportunity inside there. But let's add another to the list. Another region bites the dust, literally. But it's because of drought. Climate shift. Central America going into a drought. Well, this is what drove the Mayans to collapse circa 800 AD. This is what drove the Tang Dynasty to collapse circa 800 AD. Now, what do you see that's matching here? The drought in these same two locations that are marked in history by collapses of dynasties and kingdoms. In the same exact patterns, in the same exact places, and we're supposed to think that this is just random happenstance. I personally don't think so. It's my own opinion, though. I think that at the very minimum, we're repeating something in the 1,200-year cycle. It's a heavy, more powerful cycle than the 400-year grand solar minimum. It would be a set of three, would it not? It would be a cycle of three within three. You start to see threes, sixes, and nines wherever you go across the planet, and I don't care which culture, which religion, you see it again and again and again. Maybe they mark these out. Maybe that's what the three was all about. And maybe three of these 1,200 year cycles is 3,600 years. And then we start to get the 3 plus the 6 is 9. And we start to see this everywhere. The weather has become more erratic. See, they'll say that. They'll put it in the news media, corporate media, they'll put it in there. Weather is erratic, but they'll never really come down to it except they'll keep blaming it on CO2, which it's not. It's the sun. So that's your greatest strength, is knowing where these changes are coming from. Historically low European potato harvest, and they blame it on shifting jet streams. Okay, awesome. Thank you. Due to, get this one, reduced low solar activity. So here we are, lowest European potato harvest on record. But again, how far back are they going in the records? They just put the record on record, but they don't tell you exactly when the record began. And again, that's one of my qualms with corporate media is they'll say on record, but they don't tell you how far back that goes. If it goes back to like 1967, that's not really a record because you need to go back to maybe the potato famine in the 1800s, and we'll start to see, is it truly the lowest on record? Here's another one, UK extremes to send food prices skyrocketing. Kenyan farmers urged to take up insurance due to adverse climate shocks. Poor harvest, shift in rainfall patterns to blame in Kenyan corn losses. And if you look at the USDA reports, which I highly recommend that you would do, they have the ending stocks, the carryover stocks. So what they did was they started 5 years ago when they'll show you 2012 and 13, then there's 13, 14, 14, 15, 15, 16, 16, 17, 17, 18. So these are the years that they'll have in the 5 years. They'll have 5 columns. Well, the carryover was 570 million tons. This is just for the global grains. But then that suddenly drops down to 520 million tons. So I'm wondering where the 50 million tons has gone to, because this is the carryover. This is what's left at the end of the year after they've sold off and have they balanced with the imports, with the exports. Why is it down 50 million tons? And this is straight from the USDA. I encourage you to go over. You can check out their website. There's so many other resources out here for you to take advantage of as well. I'm not the only person covering these types of changes that are occurring on our planet. I'm just one of many. I encourage you to take a look at Ice Age Farmer. Christian does a great job covering these same types of food crop losses. Diamond over at Oppenheimer Ranch Project is always talking about these same things. Christopher, the climate guy, Ice Age 2050. How about the Suspicious Observers? That crew with Ben Davidson, Trevor, Billy, they're always talking about these same things as well. There's just so many voices out there, and the amount of people talking about these changes is just, it's becoming larger and larger every day. And it's great that more people are talking about it.
This video is brought to you by our friends at TrueLeafMarket.com. Heirloom and organic seeds for any grow zone on our planet.